today's show, it's another one of our fast-becoming legendary Fireside chats. We talk about video, pricing, meetings, and then we have a technical glitch. Unbelievably, it's my fault, but don't tell Greg. Anyway, grab a drink, open your retouch software, and here's the episode.
Morning.
Morning,
this
morning,
glum
morning.
day. This glum August day.
You mean just this glum August?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's such a miserable month, isn't it? August is historically the month where none of us work and the sun shines, right? So no one really cares about not working because everyone's on holiday.
Yeah.
Whereas today, for example, I've had to go out at 7 a.m. and dramatically unblock my gutters because it was raining so hard. We had water pouring and it was just everywhere. It just wasn't. It wasn't a solid start.
What's a dramatic unblock look like? Does it involve explosives?
No, it's mainly me throwing everything around. Well, yeah, with TNT with the plunger. Clear. Yeah, no, it was. I think maybe the dramatic part was that it was happening at 7 a.m.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I was there in the rain, having to ask my next door neighbour for a ladder. So it wasn't a strong start.
My morning woke with the dawning realization that I forgot to put the recycling out, and hearing the bin lorry down the end of the road, and that thing where you go, oh shit, and you run around
say
grabbing all the recycling.
That's the worst type of panic, isn't it? You're like, oh my god!
And then you run out there and just your pants, and you're like, wait.
Yeah, no, it's we've got some. Yeah, we've got some neighbours who put their bins out about 3 weeks early. So it's always good to know, they put the bins out, so we're good to go.
Yeah. Anyway, how have you been, man?
All right, actually. You know, when people are like, if someone says they're fine, or they're not really fine, actually everything's all right. Everything's good. What about you?
I'm good. I was in such a rush this morning that I've had a breakfast of Krispy Kremes because my wife had a work due last night and brought home a whole load of Krispy Kremes.
Breakfast of champions.
And a double espresso. So I am wired. But
so yeah, just to say, I'm not sponsored by Krispy Kremes. We should be, but we're not. I've also realised that if you get leftover Krispy Kremes, I mean, this was quite obvious really in hindsight, they're probably the Krispy Kremes that no one likes.
Yeah, but is there a Krispy Kreme that no one likes?
Well, yeah, I've just eaten it.
Which one was it? Coffee and walnut or something?
Some weird. I think it's some kind of weird strawberry raspberry thingy.
Oh, that's my favourite.
Anyway, weirdo.
Anyway, photography.
Yeah. So last episode we got some. Seems to have hit a. I was going to say hit a nerve, but I'm guessing not really hit a nerve, but hit the right note. I think struck a note. With our listeners.
A note. There we go.
I think I'm mixing my metaphors there, but yeah, we've had quite a bit of kind of feedback and people getting in touch, being like, "Yeah, that was really good to hear." I think everyone was, praising Jack for just being so open and honest, and I put a few things up that I'd seen from there was a post from a photo editor. Where someone
was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, talking about 2023, and was like, "Can we talk about 2023? Because it's it's a bit shit." And yeah, I got so many people messaging me saying, "Yep, same here. That's definitely the case over here." So, and there was one post that he won't mind me mentioning it because I did ask his permission, but there was Steve Bright. He'd put a piece on. Let me just quickly find it so I don't totally misquote him, but he'd said, "I'm beginning to think that all the traditional advice from photography experts on how to make it as a photographer is like getting advice on house buying from someone who bought a house for 40k in the 80s, which is now worth over $1 million. They came up in an industry landscape which was unrecognizable to those of us trying to forge ahead today." And I think he raises an interesting point, because so often when you hear photographers talking about their journey into photography, you kind of think, well, as valid and interesting as it is, I don't know how relevant it is to anyone else, because everyone's journey into photography is so unique to their circumstances. And quite often, especially now, the industry is changing so much that traditional routes and traditional kind of ways of entry are kind of very different to what people are discovering now. So that's something we want to try and take on board. And, at some point in the future, we'd love to try and bring somebody on who's kind of in the middle of that journey, perhaps, or somebody who's earlier on in their career that can kind of talk about what it's like out there for them at the moment. Maybe somebody who's just graduated or somebody who's looking to start. I think that might be quite an interesting discussion for us to have. So yeah, there's something we'd like to do. Obviously, we need to find the time to go and source somebody who's going to be good. But if listeners want to hear that and they have anyone in mind or think anybody would make for an interesting interview, or somebody that would, is quite eloquent, but maybe early on in their career, then, we're always open to suggestions. We love getting feedback from you guys. So please do send over any ideas.
Well, also from a feedback point of view, it helps us get better, right? It helps us get, make a better and more relevant and hopefully a more helpful podcast. That was the whole point of starting this in the first place, is to try and create that sense of community, like that people aren't alone. Again, going on about, how solitudal, is that right? How much solitude there is involved in our job, to hopefully hear that other people are in the same boat.
We're also like hyper aware of how white and middle-aged we are. So, we're always keen to kind of get diverse voices on and people from different backgrounds, because we're not going to be relevant to everyone. So we need to make sure that we're covering that.
Well, we might not be relevant, but we want to make sure the podcast is.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Thank you.
But we've also had some questions come in through. So if you are not a Patreon...
Sorry, very quickly. Can I just say,
oh dear,
on a photo editor's post about 2023 being the worst year on record, can I just say scroll down a little bit, there is an absolutely classic comment. And I feel really sorry for the guy, because he says, it just says nothing. And Rob's posted it, and it just says, I've actually had to go back to being a part-time drug dealer. Times are tough, to be fair. So.
Never read the comments. Never go into the comments. Sorry, I was saying that if I'm not sure, we hark on about it enough, but obviously to support this podcast, we have Patreons, and if you are a patron, you get to become, you get to join a private WhatsApp group that we run for Patreon members only, and we've had a few questions on there, haven't we? So I thought we could also maybe address some of those just on the pod.
Of course. I will also say, I've just had an email. The last episode was an absolute masterpiece. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Appreciate that, Tom. I didn't, Tom. It was someone called Tom emailing me. I haven't just emailed myself. Be like, quick, Tom, read this out.
Sure?
If listened with it quickly on the Patreon thing, it's getting busier, and it's a really friendly chat on the private WhatsApp group. But in all honesty, this costs us money, time, effort. So if you would like to support the show in any way, you can go to patreon.com/exposed negative. And then there's also on the website, there's details of how to donate and stuff like that. And that basically just helps us with the running costs of doing this. Sadly, we lose money hand over fist doing this, but we love doing it. So if there was any way you could support us, that'd be great. We're also talking about doing a line of merch. So if you want to see...
Are we losing money mainly because you're spending it on neon signs that say TB?
Maybe. I was hoping we'd get through the entire episode without mentioning the elephant in the room.
That would have been perfect if at that moment you just switched it off so it disappeared.
Do you know what? It's funny thing is, because my whole house is smart.
Sign? Yeah.
What sign do you mean, Greg? I don't know which sign.
There we go.
But that would have been... if only you'd queued me up for that. My timing is not so good. But yes, no, that is basically where the budget for the show goes. Illuminating my office.
Tom's always wanted his name in neon. He couldn't afford his full name, so he just got the TV.
I will also say this neon has caused me untold amounts of drama from a flicker point of view. It is a cheap LED, and the sync to get it not flickering. The only reason I can do it, because the Canon camera I use as the webcam, which I got told was overkill for a webcam the other day, which I think was a bit harsh. I have to have it because it has the rotating dial, so I can go between colour and black and white easily. But apparently an R6 Mark II with a 15 to 35 RF is overkill. for a webcam. Couldn't believe it. But the flicker on it, what a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. None of the dimmers work.
How did you get over it? What did you?
So it's running into a power and conditioning power strip, and then I
Right.
have managed to hack it and dial it in, and then also on the camera, I have had to use the Canons have a high flicker or a flicker anti-flicker mode in the video settings, and where it will set the shutter speed. I think the shutter speed for this should be 1/60 because we record at 30 frames or 29.97. Oh, interesting fact. Do you want to know why 29.97 is the standard and not 30 frames per second?
I feel like I did know this, but no, go on.
So, right. So in the States, so NTSC, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this. Apologies if I do, but I'm fairly certain when black and white television moved to color, there wasn't enough bandwidth, so they had to drop the frame rate ever so slightly to be able to get the color information into it. So it became 29.97 as opposed to 30 frames.
I did not know that. There we go.
There you go. But anyway, so we record its variable frame rate video for these podcasts, and the anti-flicker then automatically senses the flicker of the LED and has set my shutter speed to 82.3.
Wow.
So, and it isn't flickering, so everything's fine, everything's good. I'm just like leaving it as is. I'm just like, I'm not touching the thing. But I have big news. I've sorted my office. Can we just talk about feng shui for a split second?
Mm-hmm.
I feel so feng shuied. I don't know what the term is, but like I've had my office repainted. I put in some new drawers, which, as I showed you earlier, have soft close, which I was very impressed about. And I've basically just got rid of, because when I used to talk about the great simplification, I've actually done it. I've actually now got, that's my kit there, apart from all the stuff outside that you can't see. But can't have everything. But yeah, honestly, isn't it so funny the impact of a working space that can have on your mindset, have on your mood. And I don't think I'd ever quite realise that, because we moved into this house about 5-6 years ago. There's loads. I'd moved everything around. If you scroll back through loads of my online videos, the office is forever changing, and as a result, drills in the walls, cracks. I'd painted over it with the wrong color paint, like all sorts of stuff. And so now everything is fixed. Honestly, I feel so amazing as a result. It's honestly so weird. Big shout out to my amazing mate, Painter Rick, who has done an absolutely brilliant job.
Painter Rick.
It's to Rick. Yeah, no, he's great. No, honestly, it's such a vibe in here now. It's great.
I'm very envious because my desk is incredibly cluttered, and I mean,
but I feel like
I don't do this from my studio. Yeah, but my studio is very different. But I don't record the pod from the studio for various reasons.
Tom Parker.
Yeah, basically one reason. Yeah, no.
Bless him. Hi, Tom.
Loud studio mates who are in a working space. I can't guarantee it's going to be quiet. So, so I record it from home from my shed, which is my home office, but it's also like my shed. So it has a woodworking bench over there and a bunch of tools and all sorts. And it's like mixing computer monitors and sawdust. Not ideal.
Not a vibe. Tell you what, though, because the listeners probably don't know this about you, is you are an incredibly talented woodsman.
It's spoon carver.
No. Well, yeah, but you were able to do
a spoon in years.
But you were able to do it.
That was my lockdown. Those were my little lockdown days. That was because we had such a lovely summer that summer, and all I wanted to do was sit on my because I have a little porch on this shed. I wanted to sit on the porch in my rocking chairs, carving spoons.
Say, son.
I aged a lot that lockdown. How are you boys doing? Yeah, no. Let's stop. Okay, let's stop before we offend any American listeners from the deep south.
We do love America.
Let's get back to the WhatsApp group. So we had these questions.
That's what we were talking about.
Yes, that's what we were talking about. I can't get that guy's voice out of my head now.
Because I seem to remember him being a questionable character.
What question? Yes. So
let's run through them, right? So we have got a very good question from. Let's talk about our question from David, right? So David says, basic pricing models for video would be helpful. If a client asks for a little video on top of a still shoot, nothing too fancy, just a little Insta content, so not stacks of post either. Number one, depends how you're going to do the post, I guess, because if it's nothing too extra, you need to, because I don't think necessarily that usage kind of comes into it. You kind of get paid the fee with video. You don't get usage, same as we do. It depends how much extra effort is needed. If they're like, you've specifically shooting this one still thing, and then they've asked for something completely different, just because it's Instagram. Well, that doesn't matter. It's still a huge level of effort to bring in the extra kit and stuff like that. So it depends entirely on, the extra level of effort. I think a lot of people say, last night, for example, I was at the pub and someone said, Tom, I've got this great project for you. And I was like, oh yeah, it's a 5-year project. I went, oh yeah. And they went, it's a documentary. I went, no chance. I'm not interested at all, because what that means is a lot of effort for no payoff and no money whatsoever. These people, they've got a great idea, but they don't necessarily understand the amount of work that goes into it. So whatever you do say to the client, make them aware of exactly how much work that is. They might just say, oh, it's just a quick thing for Instagram. And you kind of go, well, yes, but then someone's got to edit it. Someone's got to grade it. Someone's got to then do an audio mix. Someone's got to then sound design it. And sometimes it might not necessarily be that complicated. They might just want to bosh something up. Again, it depends on the client, depends on the level of work they're expecting. So I think speak to them about their expectations. Always under promise and over deliver, as opposed to the other way around. And so from a pricing point of view, I think what me and Greg have historically done is we go to the APA rates. So for me, this has always been like, this is an industry standard rate. They have minimum rates, they have maximum rates. And I just, if I ever get questioned about the rates I've put on an invoice, I just say, yeah, they're the APA standard rates. That's what I refer to.
So we'll link to that in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, the link will be below. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes, or you can find them on the website. So for example, APA rates as of July 2023, director of photography, minimum basic day rate is 831, maximum basic day rate is 1,388. So it's kind of helpful to give you a ballpark to know where you're coming in. But then obviously they also have your basic hourly rate, double hourly rate, triple hourly rate, and standard overtime, which is another thing to consider, because photographers a lot of photographers don't seem to charge overtime. And I wonder whether or not that will start to change, because, assistants can charge overtime and crew can charge overtime. And so it stands to reason that photographers probably should charge overtime if they're, especially if they're in a position where it's kind of being taken for granted that they will end up working, insane hours a day. So those rates are definitely worth looking at, and there's a whole PDF, and you can search through. They've got everything from, director of photography, camera operator, focus pullers, clipper loaders, DITs, key grips, all of that stuff.
Does it have editors? Does it have editors?
So it's got directors, producers, director of photography, gaffers, SFX supervisors, art directors, construction managers, with everything that goes underneath that, including like master plaster, which I love, home economists, sound mixers, costume designers, chief makeup artists.
Doesn't seem to have editors.
COVID supervisor.
I wonder if they're a separate organisation, probably.
Yeah.
But I think another thing to say is, regardless of how simple the content might be, make sure you factor in for the editing and for revisions.
Yeah.
Because there will always be, I'm currently working on 12 films, and we're currently up to V5 on most of them. That's a lot of revisions, but it had all been factored into the quotes. I've got no issues doing it. And, we've created some really nice films. But I think that there's always revisions, especially if there's more than one reviewer. I think that's what I've really learned, is if you're just one-on-one dealing with someone, like I go to you, Greg, and we've done a video together, and you can just bring your feedback straight away. Or sometimes you'll do a revision and then someone else will see the video and just say, oh, actually, I preferred the V1. And then, their authority might be, they might...
Well, that's where things like Frame.io and what have you come in, don't they? And to be quite useful, and programs like that, because you can get kind of all of those notes compiled in one place. And then once you've got everything in, you can give somebody a deadline and say, listen, I need to have all the feedback notes by this date. And then we will actually work on the next revision, rather than and we've all made that mistake in the past where you've sent something back and it goes back and forth, and you start to think, oh God, I didn't stipulate how many revisions there were because it seemed like quite a kind of relaxed thing to start with, but now it's getting more complicated. And that's a real dangerous area to be in, especially if you're working for kind of friends or friends of friends, where people go, oh, I'm not going to bother putting anything in writing or stipulating anything up front. It then becomes a lot more awkward than to have that conversation down the line where they start to take the piss, not because they're, not good people, but because they don't understand the process, perhaps.
Well, also they want what they, I think, would see as minor changes. But then obviously, if you're, for example, you're going to cut a clip out,
minor changes.
And everything's...
I love the edit. Can we change the music?
Yeah, exactly. or they're like, oh, I really love the VO, but can you just lose that 10 seconds in the middle? And I'm like, I've timed everything up to the track.
Yeah.
Right. So if you then lose 10 seconds, everything's balked. So it's not just a case of just cutting it out. You have to then basically go back and refix the whole edit. Yeah. So I basically always just make sure you kind of basically just have a chat and make sure you know exactly what they are expecting, but also what they can expect from you. And then obviously factor that in on the quote.
I'm just sorry, I'm distracted. I'm trying to find the next question on there, but today's going to be a short episode because these fireside chats, as we're calling them, which somebody complained about, by the way. They didn't complain. They left a review in the comment which contained a distinct lack of fires. Which
sorry about that. This is my fire.
Yes, maybe we should just overlay like the sound of crackling. That wouldn't be at all annoying, would it?
I can do that. Well, throughout the whole episode.
The whole
I can do. I can do
we're
that.
Just on fire slowly.
No, no problem.
So, what else have we got in this that we need to address?
A topic that is at the forefront of my mind is getting new clients. A question from Andy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is, I don't even think that is a question that can be answered in 10 minutes. I think that is a full episode. If you want us to do a full episode on it, we can talk about it now. How do you do that?
Yeah, there's so many different approaches for people depending on what their work is, really. Whether or not you go down the targeted route of finding somebody who's really relevant to what you do and really trying to court that person and get in front of them, or whether or not you're just trying to get your work out to as many potential new clients, as possible. And that could be sending out a mailer to 2,000 people who work in the relevant industry. And of course, depending on what you're doing, dictates how tailored you can afford to be with your approach. Traditional mail outs obviously are one way of doing it. Paper mailers, I think posted mailers always have more of an effect, if I'm honest, but obviously cost a lot more, take a lot more time, are much more nuanced and tailored, as the name suggests. But to be able to actually, if you've got, and again, it totally depends on your work. Because if you're doing video, then that's not necessarily going to be the best way. Your work's going to need to be shown in a digital fashion. But if you're, shooting beautiful pictures that are going to look best printed on paper that you choose, then sometimes sending 10 mailers, posted mailers, is going to be more effective than sending 100 emails. Because that printed piece will sit on somebody's desk and hopefully not end up in a bin. Some of them might, but some of them will sit on somebody's desk. I remember, it's not a great advert for it, but I remember years ago sending one to an art director in the States. Never got any work for it, but years later, there was an interview with her on some kind of website, and she had a picture of her desk, and there pinned to the board was my mailer. And I
There we
thought,
go.
wow, it made enough of an impression for her to keep it.
Mm.
I never got any work from it, but you never know where that leads. Yeah, and you never know where that leads. It might be like they've suggested me to somebody else, and then that's kind of led on to work from, and I've never connected the dots, So, yeah, there's lots of different ways of skinning a cat, and I think it is an episode we'd like to try and cover at some point. Definitely, we'll need to figure out what's who's a good person to hear from. But to go back in previous episodes, like Mprint, if you want to, that episode is really good if you're thinking about anything printed or portfolios. We've got some great ones coming up from photo consultants that are being recorded next week, actually, and going to be pushed out for the next couple of episodes. So they're going to be super helpful when it comes to how you market yourself and how you place yourself. So yeah, make sure you catch those episodes.
There is a point point I do kind of quickly want to make. Obviously, the way I tend to do it is I just try and get meetings, right? I kind of feel like I'm much easier to sell myself when I'm in the meeting. They can kind of get more of a vibe about what I'm about. I can tell some silly jokes. I have a lovely little leave behind that I leave. I really thrive in a meeting, and the more people in the meeting, the better. I really love it. But I will say, I've found it really, really hard, or much, much harder even, to get meetings since COVID, because obviously so many people are now working from home.
Yeah.
And when they aren't
what,
working
you mean you
from home,
haven't been knocking on their door and sitting in their living room?
No, there was that one. Look, Greg, there was that one time. No, but it's really hard.
I don't work from the office those days. That's fine. I'll come to your house.
Not a problem. I'm happy. Get the kettle on. No, it's but it's tricky, right? Because obviously, if people are only in the office 1 or 2 days a week, well, those 1 or 2 days a week, guaranteed, their whole team will be in, and so everyone will then be so busy trying to cram as much work into those 2 days or 1 day that actually, do they have time for half hour to sit down with a photographer or an hour?
It's also it's also interesting because you end up in that situation. There might be 7 or 8 people that are in the room looking at your work, and you're trying to figure out who's who, remember everyone's names, work out what they work on, whether or not, okay, I've got that project that I could show this person actually because they've just worked on that account. It's quite exhausting doing those meetings, especially you go in on your own and you kind of, you've got a bunch of people waiting for you to basically be a performing monkey. And you can't please everyone, and you're going to have, you're going to have different levels of interest. You're going to have, invariably you're going to have like the intern in there who's probably the most engaged and the most interested in your portfolio. And then you're going to have some grizzled old art buyer who kind of comes in and grunts and then goes off for a fag break or something. It can be a real high kind of intense atmosphere to go into. You come out, sometimes it's a bit of a blur. I mean, I've been into them and you come out and you go, what did I talk about? Like who was who? Like, I don't actually remember any of that because the adrenaline's still pumping,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Do you enjoy it at all though? That
I do sometimes. It really depends for me personally. It depends on my mood on that day, and whether or not I gel with the people, whether or not I feel like they're getting on board with the work and are genuinely interested in asking interesting questions, and also whether or not I'm excited about the work I'm showing. Because let's face it, we shoot projects and we forget that somebody's going to be seeing it for the first time, but we've seen it 250 times, and we go in and we're like, yeah, so this is the thing I did, and it's like maintaining that level of excitement the first time you showed it to someone is incredibly difficult.
Oh yeah,
because you start to see all the flaws in it.
But also, I did a meeting the other day and they were like, who's this? And I went, shit, terrible, but I actually cannot remember his name.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, oh no, I remember the guy. Yeah, he was great. But like, it took me a while because I'm now shooting, I'm aiming for a personal project a week, which is a lot, and I'm failing. So what I'm really aiming for is a personal project every fortnight, which I seem to be doing all right at. But it's because I'm now shooting so much, and then I do a lot of bigger jobs I can't talk about, but I do a lot of the smaller jobs. then just forever. I mean, I'm terrible on Instagram, but if I was to post everything I was doing, my Instagram would be like 2 things a day. But it's like and that's not necessarily commissions, by the way. That's also just trying to get as much personal work shot as possible. Because that's why I do this. I don't do this job for money. I do this job because I just love shooting. I shoot anything. It's great. And I've totally lost my train of thought.
Shall we go back to the questions?
Shall we?
Had one
I think that was good. I had a really solid point lined up as well.
I think it was you talking about how you talk in meetings and
that's right. Yeah, and that happens all the time. But do you know what though? I love those meetings. I have an iPad portfolio, right? We talked about this on the Imprint thing, but I have a lot of them, and I think I have 4 or 5 of the iPad Pros, right? And so people are like, they're like, "Oh, you've got an iPad," and I'm like, "No, everyone's got an iPad." And then they're like, "Oh wow, that's actually pretty baller." I don't know anyone else who does that amount of iPads. There might be an agent who has that many, but like for me, I'm like, right, cool, because I sync them all up, everything's good. But the reason, my point was, one of the reasons I don't do print, I think I talked about it in the Imprint episode, was that because I'm shooting so much, not necessarily commissions, but a lot of my personal work as well, my book would just be unupdatable, or I think the cost would just be so prohibitive of doing the prints, and also I'd be forever waiting for prints to come back. So I'm just actually, it's much easier. I shot a medieval festival at the weekend. Yeah, I just shot a series of portraits there. There's 2 that I want to put in the book, and now 1 will actually make it. A photo of an archer, but the fact that I'm able to forever be updating the book and then easily tailor it to a specific person gives me a bit of an advantage, because then I can sync it across all devices and not show off in a meeting, but I do quite love, I'm a bit of an extrovert, right? So I'm just like, I'll go into these meetings and I'll be like, "Hey, what's up?" Whoa. And I love all of that. But I can also see, like, on the flip side, how some people might be completely daunted by it, and how it could be, a real, almost, especially in the early days of your career, kind of a terrifying experience, right? I do remember one art buyer who I went in to see, and they tore my book apart. This is in 2015 or 16. Tore it apart, and they were like, "I'm telling you this because I like you." And I was like, "I appreciate that, but I'm going to cry."
Yeah.
And it was, and they were like, "Look, do you want feedback?" And I was like, "Yes, please." And they went, "Yeah, get rid of half your book." And I was like, "Oh wow, okay, right. You're not kidding. You really do think half the work's good, half the work's shit." So then I did it. The following week, I ripped out all the old pages from my book, and I was like, "Right, okay, that's what they said. I'm going to go and fix it." So I went off and shot loads of new personal work. So actually, I also find the meetings really useful for getting feedback.
Yeah, for gauge. They're a good gauge, aren't they, and where your work's going and what's 100%. Working.
And also, ask people at the end, just be like, "Look, what do you think of the work? What do you think of the book?" It's another thing to chat to people about.
That said, you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different opinions.
Absolutely.
And there has to be an element of you kind of pushing to some degree. Obviously, don't do it to flog a dead horse, but like you pushing what you want to be shooting and what you care about, and what you're passionate about. And sometimes that's just going to go to the wrong audience, and it doesn't mean the work's not necessarily good. It just means that the people that you're showing it to aren't the right audience for that work.
Of course.
If you
at the end of the day, you've got to please yourself, right?
Yeah. If you end up producing a book that's just for everyone, you're going to end up with something that's very generic and very kind of brown. So it's you've got to be kind of, it's finding that balance between willing to kind of push what you care about and what you know to be good versus what people are telling you is working and what's not working.
Yeah.
No,
agreed.
Yeah. So to go on that, the last kind of question we had there was from Sam, which was to do with agents. And I mean, again, this is something we want to do an episode on at some point. We want to speak to some more agents, photography agents. I was talking about kind of, whether or not agents feasibly help find higher paying work, that allow you to kind of create time to do more personal work, which is, a model which definitely was the case, I think, in the kind of advertising heydays, where you could do one big project and then kind of spend the rest of the time and a lot of that money from that pushing your own personal work. And that does still exist to some degree. You do have to take, know that it's going to be a bit feast and famine, and there are going to be times when, if you are lucky enough to land a big job and get well paid for it, then to reinvest some of that money into shooting your own personal stuff. But I also think, people's ideas of agents and what agents do can be very different. I think agents can be very different. Some agents are going to be very kind of stand back and kind of let you do the work. Some agents are really going to push you and be expecting a lot from you. And, people can get quite excited about the prospect of getting an agent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to solve all your problems, because, finding the right agent actually takes time, and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to end up moving. That will happen. Because you've got to find a relationship that actually works, and it's got to be long term. It's got to maintain itself. And to some degree, that involves the agent nurturing the photographer, because there are agents out there that will take you on and just be kind of like seeing dollar signs, and they get you because they're like, this person's going to be the next big thing. And that can be great for a while, but if they're not actually interested or care about you as a person, then as soon as you become kind of unfashionable, you're going to get dropped. So you need to find somebody who actually is invested in you as the photographer and is willing to kind of help mentor in places and to offer that feedback and be constructive with it. Because at the end of the day, if you want that relationship to last, you're going to have to evolve. Your work's going to have to evolve. It's going to have to change with the trends and maintain its relevancy to some degree. But then, you'd hope that in that situation, the agent will help you with that process and be honest and open with you on that process. And that's not necessarily always going to be the case.
I think also the role of the agent historically, not historically, but it has changed. There's a lot of agents now who also will run the production on the jobs and stuff like that, and they tend to be relatively small teams as well. So what we've just had there is a glitch of a glitch. So this is the second time we're having to record this, because for some reason Greg's browser is refusing to upload still. It's uploading.
It's uploaded.
My God.
Don't blame me honestly, all the time.
Running a podcast, this is the bit of it that they never talk about. It's really hard work because nothing seems to work ever. When things go smoothly one week, the next week
blaming my shed net.
No, I'm on CountryNet. Got to be careful how I say that. And it's living out in the country is not that great, especially when you are a media professional who needs to upload large files. B, you back up everything online. C, you run a podcast. Really bloody hard work. I had an email from Sky the other day going, "You really need to stop uploading stuff." I was like, "Oh right, cool, thanks guys, appreciate it."
Sky.
So,
for the record,
I didn't actually have a letter from Sky. It was part of it, meant to be a joke, but for legal reasons, I have to state that.
We now have an ex-neg lawyer who sits in there. So we had basically we'd done an amazing recording, 10 minutes lost of us rambling on about nonsense. It was peak podcast. You'll just have to wait. We will re-record. We'll do another version of this question that we had on the next episode of Firesides. For those of you who don't really haven't listened to the Firesides before, I don't know why we call them Firesides. I blame Tom for that. He came up with it, and it sounds snappy.
It's a fireside chat, isn't it? Even though, as the comments on YouTube say, that we have a distinct lack of fires.
Fire. Yeah, exactly.
I might just put one in down at the bottom.
So basically, though, they're kind of replacing a little bit like the FAQ episodes. We will answer questions in the Firesides, and we'll just generally have a chat and a catch up. It means we can put them out more regularly. And That's it, really. Our next episodes that are coming up are absolute stonkers. We've got 2 episodes coming up that I'm really excited about with industry consultants, photography consultants, or visual media kind of consultants. It's going to be a lot of chat about kind of how you think about your practice, how you place yourself in the market, how you deal with stuff that we've spoken about before, actually, on the Jack Lowe episode and previous episodes in terms of mental preparedness and resilience and all of these things. It's going to be kind of lots of theory, but hopefully really practical stuff that you can action yourselves. How to think about your brand, how to place yourself, how to market yourself. All of this stuff is going to be covered. So yeah, we've got a UK based person coming on and somebody who's calling in from New York as well. So they're also going to give us 2 different perspectives from 2 different, slightly different kind of cultural backgrounds in that sense. Because I sometimes find that when we speak to American guests, there's a slightly different cultural approach to the photo industry.
And the market's
exactly.
very different in the States, isn't it?
Yeah,
so it's obviously really interesting to hear that side of things as well. I will also say one of the guests, without giving them away, is I watched them give a talk 7 years ago, maybe even longer, and I've remembered various things from that talk, and they've been invaluable. When you go to a talk and someone says something that really lands, and you just go, great. And so when they were talking about I'm not going into it because I'm sure they'll cover it.
We'll cover
it. It was really, really, it stuck with me for a very, very long time. Couldn't remember anyone else on the panel, but I remember them.
Just want to raise my finger. My camera battery is incredibly low, and I don't want us to have a third glitch. So, shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, but glitches come in threes, don't they? So, hang on, why don't you have it plugged in? Oh, Greg. This is me overcompensating because actually the first original glitch was mine. But on to the next one.
On to the next glitch. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll speak to you on the next one.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode of the Exposed Negative podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by heading to our Patreon or doing one-offs. The details are on the website, and the Patreon is patreon.com/exposed negative. We'd love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@exposed negative. And obviously, we're on Instagram, which is xnegative. If you want to follow us personally, mine is tombarnes.com on Instagram. And the website, and then Greg's is @GregFennell, and that's FUNNELL. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and hopefully you enjoy the next one.